So our first panel, the what's now, what's next. I'll let each of them introduce themselves, but what we tried to do is bring a cross section of the community together to really help us focus on how to solution. We all know the problems, we've heard it, we feel it, and together we can solve this. At Turtle, being over 100 years old, we have lived through so many times of disruption. That gives us the opportunity for both growth and innovation. And so right now we're at the 5.0 of the industry transitions, and that's really the intersection of people and technology that can solve big challenges, just like climate. So let me introduce our panel. Brandon Owens, VP of Innovation from NYSERDA. We have Heidi Banko, who's the head of product at Infor, and thank you very much, Heidi, for being a host for us and a supply chain expert. And then Darren Wolford, co-founder and CEO at Triangle. So let me have you each introduce yourselves.
Okay, thanks so much. A pleasure to be here. I've really developed a great relationship with Turtle and this team over the last year, so I'm happy to support this. You're doing great stuff. My name is Brandon Owens. I lead the innovation and research team at NYSERDA, so that's your state energy office. We just celebrated our 50-year anniversary, so we've been around a while, investing in clean energy technologies. Right now, we're very much focused on the decarbonization and the climate transition. New York has a law that sets some very steep targets, and they've also set aside money. It's about $7,500 million a year for R&D, and that's the program that I lead. So we do R&D kind of across the waterfront in terms of energy technologies, from hydrogen and advanced fuels to all power generation and storage technologies. We do a lot of advanced buildings research as well as grid modernization. So we kind of run into all different areas of innovation.
Hi, everybody. Heidi Banko. As mentioned, I work Infor Nexus with Brian and product strategy. Been with the company 26 years this November. And Infor Nexus is a multi-enterprise supply chain business network that for 26 years, our focus is connecting companies with all their supply chain partners. Right? How do you orchestrate supply chains? Everything from how you source your product, and deliver a product, and pay your product. And for years, it was about how we help company improve business performance, supply chain performance, deliver on time and full at the lowest cost by reducing a lot of inefficiencies in the supply chain through better connectivity and visibility. And I would say the last few years, it's also been focusing on how do you improve environmental performance as well. So great to be here.
Well, I went already, so.
We love that. It's fun to hear this rousing level of enthusiasm. So Brandon, New York State has been a leader in this energy transition. What specifically do you think is moving the needle most to lead through this energy transition?
Well, the policy helps. I mentioned the targets. We have a 0 by 40 goal. And that is sort of driving a lot of investment, and it's sort of been the North Star for the state. And I also mentioned the state's actually putting quite a bit of money behind these initiatives. And so we're, using that on emerging energy technologies, but NYSERDA also has the Green Bank, so we're doing financing. We also have a commercial accelerator. So we're kind of trying to hit it from all the different angles, but it's really kind of the policy support kind of sets the foundation.
And public-private partnerships, is that a key part? Because I think that what you're doing is unique, right? Leading the research, and maybe you could share a bit of some of your thoughts on technology too.
Yeah, the public-private, the market's sort of changing, particularly with all the data center demand and construction that's going on, and that's really changing the nature of the market. And what we're seeing is a lot more public-private partnerships. We're seeing the hyperscalers, quite frankly, start to act like utilities because there's such a need for the power. And so there's this blending going on in terms of how those plants get built and the investment in the infrastructure. The states are playing a role. The private partners are playing a role. The financiers are playing a role. So the business model is changing.
Brings up a good point, because Heidi is our supply chain expert. We see that supply chain is really where climate risk and opportunity coincide. So can you just comment on how companies are using the supply chain visibility?
Absolutely. So as I said a few minutes ago, we've been helping companies reduce inefficiencies in supply chain to improve business performance, right? Streamline connectivity and, better manage orders and know where things are. That's visibility. Visibility is the foundation of running better supply chains. And for companies, part of it is helping to eliminate waste and the inefficiencies. So for instance, if you're not managing your supply chain and you're not handing things off in time, there's a lot, right? You can't optimize how you're packing containers and packaging. Visibility enables all of that. And we see a lot of companies, it's been about making sure the goods are showing up where they're supposed to be, but also I want to make sure I'm loading that container and reducing my overall impact. So they're measuring and looking at both. The other thing is expedites, things like that. So if you have those inefficiencies, companies tend to, instead of doing ocean shipping, will expedite things, right? So there's a lot of inefficiencies that supply chain visibility lights up. So now starting to make sure it's a way to manage better performance supply chains.
And so are people starting to see those efficiencies and the waste that they're reducing? Is that something they're tracking in terms of, in addition to where's my stuff?
Exactly. So it's from a data standpoint, it used to be, where are my orders? Where's my shipments? Where's my inventory? And now data is like, well, how much carbon impact is there, right? So when you track visibility, now they're starting to measure that. And that's something then they can factor into better planning, the right routes, the right carriers. Multi-tier traceability is the next step too, because it's those extended supply chains that's kind of setting the foundation to start capturing all that information. So now you're going from tracking orders to tracking products to tracking what it takes to make those products and the environmental impact. So it's visibility is now shifted to full multi-tier transparency.
Love that.
Love that.
And yeah, it's simply,
Multi-tier transparency.
well, and it gets to what do you see? I know you're going to expand later in the afternoon, but just a quick overview of how financial innovation can help us.
So I think one of the key themes that has come through over the last few days is that energy transition is good business. And it's about making more money through optimization of your enterprise. And so last year, this time, Jane coined the phrase carbon capitalism. And so what that means is, what are the levers of economic cost for non-compliance? And so we see four major levers. First, cost of borrowing. Cost of borrowing is going up for those that are not delivering their data. ECB raised their risk-weighted asset ratio by 20%, which means for every loan, they need to set aside 20% more capital for that loan, which was an instant increase in borrowing costs by 20% for climate exposed loans. The second is insurance. You all know the safe driver discount. Well, that's the equivalent here. If you deliver your data, you are the safe driver in this instance. You are a lower risk counterparty because you're transparent on your information. Carbon border adjustment mechanisms, CBAMs, market access. Do companies want to sell their products in other markets? If you want to sell your products there, you have to deliver compliance. And then the last piece is, again, I think a reference back to the cost of borrowing, but the number is 73% of global GDP ex-US has carbon reporting requirements. And so if you're not delivering on that information, you're not going to sell your products there. And it also means that the investors in those markets can't invest in your company. And so we did an analysis for one of our first customers. 75% of their top 10 holders are large institutional investors that have this exposure. And so if you think about losing 75% of your top 10 investors, that's hard to replace because they own a lot of shares. And if they sell your stock is going down. And a lot of management teams are driven by share price and boards are driven by share price. So we see four economic levers that are part of this carbon capitalism story. And we believe, as we'll get into it more later, carbon credits are your risk management tool.
Comment a bit about how NYSERDA would leverage public-private partnerships, or what you see will help us move from pilots to actually the big deployments that will scale, that help us lead.
Yeah, we, in terms of what's next, so we've been investing in the climate clean energy space for some time, and we're getting to the point where it's time to go from the lab, from science experiments to actual real world deployments. And so that's where we're focused over the next several years, is actually scaling up a lot of the investments the state has made, and the public-private partnerships are a big part of that. I mentioned Green Bank, which is our financing arm. And so we're looking at multiple ways that the state could participate in these projects, including providing financing, providing commercialization support, and also the R&D piece. And, there's one thing I wanted to mention being here at Climate Week, and I've said this at other presentations, which is, New York State is unique. We have a large investment in climate tech. We have the policy goals. We know that it's been a challenging year in the climate tech space. We're obviously aware of some of the federal headwinds and the pullback, and we've stepped into the breach. We've provided funding to fill some of those gaps. And, our commitment is unwavering, and we're going to continue to kind of double down in this climate space and continue to make investments and drive it forward.
Leadership. Last night we were with the Caribbean nations, and what NYSERDA and the Green Bank of New York is doing is actually a beacon for so many other island nations that are trying to leverage your examples. So we appreciate that great work.
Yeah, I'll just plug
Yeah.
NYSERDA again. So what we're doing is unique in the country, and we are a beacon, and we have real dollars we're putting behind this and an unwavering commitment, and that's especially important given what we're seeing at the federal level. So we're proud of that, and one of our key messages to the community this week is that we're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to invest in this space.
I love it. So Heidi, thinking of what's next, right? You're a supply chain expert. Technology and data is essential. Like we're hearing, it starts small. Can you share some real world examples and to inspire us and that are actionable to help us fill the gap of what we have today?
Yeah, I mean, it's all data, new types of data. Companies already struggle with how to get data from all their extended supply chains. I mean, it's one thing to get it within your own four walls in your company, but it's the extended network, right? How are you going to get all the data from all the transport and all logistics providers, all the tiers of suppliers? So to your point on it, just starting small and starting in spots. We see a number of initiatives. So some is, again, capturing the actual ocean shipping routes or air shipping routes. What are the routes, and capturing the carbon data? And what's nice about a network is you can capture it once, that carrier, that transport and share, right? So network and data sharing does make things easier. And then the other is a lot of companies are starting to work and connect data with their suppliers and measure their performance and work on their performance. Again, it's data, and a lot of this used to be surveys that were paper and manual. So having tools to collect the data, measure, manage improvement, but then again, they're networks, right? So you have one supplier as your supplier, as somebody else's supplier. So looking at how can you collect the data once and make it easier for every party to provide the data to help drive overall improvement.
So it sounds like you're connecting an ecosystem of suppliers and companies, data being the core, and systems with platforms. So in some regards, there's a commonality in the theme here. We're in this together, right? And I think, Darren, that's where you're at that intersection of finance and sustainability. How do we go forward? What is going to be, if you look forward 3 years, what's next? How do we actually accelerate?
So I've been in finance for 20 years. The first year at Morgan Stanley, we would send orders down to the New York Stock Exchange. The broker would walk up to the specialist, would get an execution back. I would be like, how did I get that price? It's not on the screen. And so within a year, electronic trading was a thing. And within 3 years, you had high frequency trading with 97% market share as electronic trading. And the key takeaway from that is don't underestimate the velocity of change if you can save people money and make money doing it. Okay. And we believe carbon credits are that solution as a market-based tool to facilitate this change. I think, one of the themes over the last year is this need for a market-based tool that has auditability, verifiability, transparency. Blockchain does a lot to deliver those things. And so we believe that we are in the early days of this carbon credit adoption curve. And just to give you a sense of where we are in that curve, there's an organization that I'm sure a lot of you know called SBTI, Science-Based Targets Initiative. SBTI has been a wet towel on carbon credits. And so they have now taken a micro step towards the carbon credit world because their 10,000 companies that are part of SBTI have said we need a market-based tool. We can't do it all ourselves. And so of that 10,000 companies, one company, Microsoft, has purchased what we think is a modest beginning of a position in carbon credits. I'll tell you why we think it's modest. So one company has purchased 30 million tons, Microsoft, over the last year. The next name that you would recognize on the list is Google, and then followed by Amazon. And Google has purchased 750,000 tons, and Amazon has purchased 250,000 tons. Let's forget about the fact that Amazon is also in the distribution business, okay, which has carbon. And so in that world of 10,000 companies, one company, Microsoft, has purchased 30 million tons. If you look at the amount of carbon that's going to come from the data center market over the next 5 years, 718 million tons of carbon. And so Microsoft has purchased 30 million tons. They're 25% market share of the data center market. So they got to purchase in the vicinity of 150 million tons over the next 5 years. Just to kind of give you a sense, that's one company. Forget about the 10,000 companies that need to do this. And now let's talk about the commodity market. Commodity market, 30% of the commodity market are typically the corporates that are buying for their business, that are managing their risk, the airlines that are buying the oil hedge. The other 70% are asset managers and speculators. And so when I see this world of over the next 3 years, all of those parties are going to be in the carbon market. And that seems like a lot.
I think that's the theme, right? It's all of us. So we've got our connected network, and we want to open it up to questions, because the truth is this ecosystem of solutions and people, that's how we're going to lead through this energy transition. So wanted to open it up. Yes, Andrew.
Maybe a naive question, but why would SBT, I don't know the acronym, but not from this space, why would they be a wet towel? Like, is it just misaligned incentives? Are they trying to focus somebody in one direction, handle it yourself, like you kind of mentioned? I just unclear.
Great question. So SBTI has historically been made up of scientists, okay? People who are doing the math on all the algorithms and the carbon, okay? I don't think they have many economists on the payroll. And so I come back to this question. When you build a home, the electrician does what the electrician does, the plumber does what the plumber does. You don't have the electrician do everything, okay? And so there's this concept of division of labor, because you're going to get the highest quality product for the lowest price possible, okay? Now, what SBTI is saying is that we want you to fix your infrastructure and get to net zero and do it all yourself. And what we are of the mindset, that's like saying to NVIDIA, all right, you make great chips, but now we need you to become a farmer, because you need to get the carbon credits in order to reduce the rest of your footprint to zero. That doesn't make sense, because it's going to take them twice as long. It's going to cost them twice as much. And so from that perspective, division of labor is how capitalism works. And that's why we call it carbon capitalism, because there's this opportunity to leverage other people's expertise so that you can get to zero at the lowest cost possible. And I just touching on our personal mandate at Triangle, it's to deliver climate change as fast as possible, but at the lowest cost to society.
There are compliance markets. You've been talking really about a market that's the voluntary market, which is small, relatively speaking. Compliance markets where you trade allowances, right? Where the government says we're going to more or less license your ability to pollute, and you just in order to offset. So tell me how what the future is of integrating those two markets.
It's a great question. So Europe is probably the most mature allowance market. The EU ETS, so the emissions trading system, is what ETS stands for. That trades about $900 billion a year. what they have realized, and I'll use farming as an example, okay? What they have realized is they are not getting change fast enough. They are not getting all sectors transitioning as fast as they can. And so they have now introduced what is called the CRCF, Carbon Removal, Carbon Farming Certification Framework. It is a market that will have equivalence with the compliance allowance market. And so actually the EU CRCF has sent us their methodologies to create assets for them. And so I see, a ton of allowances, a ton of voluntary, and these two will mingle together over time. The same way in crude, you have futures, options, spot, all different products, but at the end of the day, it's delta on your risk management screen. And so, voluntary and allowance will be synonymous because it all comes down to what's the auditor going to allow.
So fungibility is in the future.
That's right. And we believe regulated instruments are that pathway.
That enhances trust, verifiable auditability.
I guess, Brandon, you said that New York's a beacon and obviously rebuilding New York for the future. What makes it, what's working for you guys? What are you doing that other states should be learning from? What can we adapt and learn to?
Yeah, well, I mentioned the policies in the state and the commitment that we have. And I think the business community has embraced the decarbonization theme in the sense that this is an urgent priority. And so we do see investment dollars flowing into the state. And, New York City is an incredible laboratory. It's got the best and the brightest minds here. It's got the best companies in the world. There's an innovative spirit here in New York. And, we leverage that and partner kind of across the ecosystem to get things done.
Yes.
Talk about Microsoft and Google and Amazon purchasing, they're just beginning to do this. What methods are they using in order to get that done? And how do you think that evolves over time?
So each of those companies, I'll give you some background. The carbon credit market has horrible notoriety. Okay. There are enough Guardian articles on the lack of auditability and verifiability to walk around the world. Okay. And John Oliver contributes to that as well. And so all of those companies are super afraid of buying an asset because if it turns out to be a bad asset, then that's a PR and greenwashing risk for them. And so we see, and today this market does not have regulated entities in the market. What's unique about Triangle is today we're the only regulated on-ramp to create regulated carbon credits as financial instruments that banks can custody. And so there's an entire industry of Wall Street that is in the business of servicing clients, acting as that barometer of creating these assets, taking a company public. And so that's the role that we're playing to deliver assets that are standardized, that can have high velocity. You're starting to see many similar concepts that exist in the OTC bond market come into the carbon credit market, like credit ratings, like insurance. And this is all about risk management of the purchase of those assets. And so we see this as really the institutionalization of the carbon market. And so each of those companies, they have deal teams that are going through lots and lots of different solutions that are out there and trying to sort through the noise. And right now, 5% of carbon credits are purchased by those companies of all the deals that they see. Okay. And that's because there's no written supervisory procedures. They don't have AML KYC. There are many institutional flaws that we bring our knowledge to resolve.
And there are so many acronyms. There's 6. Anti-money laundering, know your customer. That's where the regulation actually brings some verifiable confidence into carbon credits. and as our friends at Chase know so well, it's important to verify and stay safe. So I thank the panel, and I think one of the things as we conclude, oh, yes.
I heard how they're tracking. I missed the first part. I'm sorry.
Repeat that again, Sheila,
Yes,
please.
thank you.
What are your supply customers talking about when it comes to decarbonization, the distribution, the tracking of their goods?
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
That well.
No one can ever hear. So getting all the data and tracking it. So connecting all those providers and being able to actually track the actual transport and route and distance, right? And think about in global supply chains, so that on distribution out, tracking trucks, but on global, there's a lot of stops. And so we've definitely been improving, using real-time things like AS data, getting the actual information to calculate the actual stops, and then they're using that in better planning and route decisioning. So it is about the data collection. And most of the companies we deal with are dealing with so many different providers and carriers. It's like, how do you get that one place easily? So they're asking us to collect that.
Last question,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, just so it's very clear that like AI is starting to really eat a ton of energy around the world. Like our energy demands must have gone way up in the last 5 years compared to what we were expecting. Are you working at NYSERDA with these hyperscalers directly to say, how do you get better clean energy? Or is it just kind of like, this is what we're doing and you can participate in this? Or is it more just?
Good question. So I think like the rest of the world, we're trying to figure out AI and figure out how to move as fast as AI is moving. There are a couple things going on. One is data centers in New York City and the challenges that they're posing, particularly on the distribution system. We're trying to figure out how to alleviate that and help there. And then the other thing is on my research program, we're formulating some problem statements that are going to lead to some solicitations. It's going to sponsor some research kind of across the board in AI. But that's something we're working on now. Part of the challenge of working in a state agency is it's really hard to move at market speed sometimes, but we're doing the best we can to kind of get on top of it and then figure out how New York State can be part of the solution.
A nice question too, Brad, because Brandon's been a leader in this space. Like Cisco asked him to be a keynote speaker on how do we bring the green solutions into the data center growth, because we know that AI is part of the solution and part of the problem. And so I think that's this connective tissue that we're creating here. I appreciate all of the questions and participation, and thank you to our panel because your leadership is helping move us forward.